Very good morning and really appreciate you joining. These are tough times, for individuals, for business, for institutions, for the world, everybody. Nobody is spared. So we all know that. The objective of this session is to, of course, I don't have a silver bullet that helps you that if you do A plus B, you will have something which is the desired result outcome called C. I don't have that. But I would be happy to share a few perspectives and share a few of the thoughts that I have with you today morning for the first half an hour or so. There are some three mindsets and three tool sets I'm going to introduce to you. And post that, I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. I'm deliberately not saying questions and answers because when you pose a question, it normally has an answer. I'm not claiming that I have an answer to everything, but rather I would engage with you in a conversation. And in that process, hopefully, we all learn from each other. That's the whole objective. So, uh, so when you look at the title of the morning's discussion, it's winning in the turns. Now, from the title slide itself, I'm sure it is fairly self-evident what I'm trying to mean. If you have watched, I'm sure you have, any Formula One Grand Prix kind of racing, you would see that the cars typically would overtake the other car at the curves, at the turns. They don't normally overtake on straight paths, as you can see from the diagram, because it's only at the turning points, all your skills, all your navigational skills, that comes to test. And that is exactly when you can overtake the other. So it's a metaphor for sure, but in your context, if you look at it, you have been running your own business. Some of you are running a startup, some of you could be already grown up, but doesn't matter. Most businesses, I would imagine a good majority, 90%, 95%, kind of is hit very hard. And the future is uncertain, which goes without saying. At the same time, I'm saying this is a turning point in a lifetime, in a history. We have not seen, the mankind has not seen this kind of a turning point in the last probably a century or even more. Because people try and compare it with things like 9/11 or the 2008, the subprime crisis, or the oil crisis of the 70s, and so on and so forth. Those are mostly economic in nature. If you look at this one, this is perhaps has already changed and will change, will evolve to change a number of orders of the world, the social order, the economic order, the political order. And that is, I think, extremely important. So the way the whole thing will pan out is not exactly known. At a macro level, we can feel the impact on our daily lives. At a macro level, we can see or foresee the economic impact that it will have, the kind of job losses, the kind of closing down of business, and all of that is there. And at the same time, I am tempted to say that this is an opportunity for you. I would not say it's an opportunity. That's not the right word. It's an obligation. Why it's an obligation? Because you guys, if you look at it, you are startups. You are one in a million. Not everybody is a startup in the world. What's a startup? What does define you? You are fearless. You have taken risks. You are passionate about solving some problem in the world. And today the world is full of problems. So if you can't solve a problem for the future, who else will? So therefore, I would tend to think of this as an obligation for you to really win in these turns. And typically when you have large businesses, they have their own baggage, they have their own inertia. They will take years to really come up to speed when you can outbid the other. So therefore, metaphorically, I am tending to think that you are like those racing cars at the curves when you can pretty much overtake anyone else if you really want to. And for that, I would say that you certainly need a few mindsets. And these are not rocket science, neither this is mandatory, neither this is comprehensive, neither, as I said, this is like any formula that A plus B equal to C, but certainly, hopefully some of these will help you overcome the situation. And I will introduce you a few tool sets as well. Someone is raising a hand. I am happy to take any question or any comment or anything that you want to share. You can unmute your mic and you can talk about it as well. There is no issues. Okay, no one, not a problem. So let me go to the first one. Uh, if you really look at, I'm sure all of you would have heard about Simon Sinek, and especially anyone who has attended any of my sessions before, I would have referred to Simon Sinek's the famous book, Start with Why, or the TED video that he has, which has got 12 million views, Start with the question why. So his latest book is on have an infinite mindset. It talks about that infinite mindset of the infinite game that we ought to play. So let me explain what is this infinite mindset all about, or the infinite game that we are supposed to play. So he talks about one example and multiple examples and stories. I will talk about one each. For example, your objective is to be healthy, let's say. Now, to become healthy, if you hit the gym for 9 hours tomorrow, you're not likely to become healthy, right? To become healthy, you have to hit the gym, for example, every day for 20 minutes every day. You have to take rest. You have to rest easy. You have to eat healthy food. You have to have pleasant relationships with people and all kinds of stuff. You should lessen your anxiety and stress and all kinds of stuff. So it is kind of, you might have a fitness goal, but in the larger context of an infinite mindset that you want to be healthy. That's a larger context. It's not really a fixed goal. That's a continuum. In the same space, he explains about a situation back in January 1968, when there was a war going on between North Vietnam and the US, as we all know, the Vietnam War. North Vietnam launched an attack, an unprecedented attack on what is called the Tet Day, T-E-T Day. Tet is nothing but the New Year's for Vietnam. Now, as per traditions, on the Tet Day, typically one is not supposed to engage in any kind of war and so on and so forth. There is a ceasefire. Like there was a ceasefire during the Christmas period back in the World War I. So similarly, no one expected that there would be a battle waged on that day. What took everyone by surprise, that North Vietnam had 85,000 of their troops attack on Tet Day in January 1968, targeting 125 base posts of US Army in South Vietnam. And basically, they were taken aback. They were completely surprised. Most of the commanders were not even in their base station. They were out in the market. They were out shopping. It was a festival day and so on and so forth. Now, what happened? North Vietnam, they lost about 35,000 of their army, whereas the US lost only about less than 1,000. And naturally, of course, if you look at the battle, by the pure sheer numbers, yes, North Vietnam might have lost the battle, right? Because they lost so many people, and within a week, the battle came to an end. If you look at the entire 10 years, 10 plus years of history of the Vietnam War, the US actually won most of the major battles. If you look at most of the major battles, go to the pieces of history, US won most of the battles. Yet, as we all know, America lost the war. So they won all the battles, but lost the war. The question is this. If you look at what did, Tet was one of the major battles that North Vietnam fought. Now, what did Tet do as an example? What Tet did was that they might have lost the battle, but that really drew the attention of the US middle class, of the US student community, and so on and so forth. The war basically got a political rhetoric in the US, and which North Vietnam strategically drove that. They stopped getting the support of the common people in the US. It drove President Johnson to withdraw his name from the second election that he was going to contest for, and so on and so forth. And to cut a long story short, America eventually had to withdraw, and they kind of, you can say, lost the war. Now, what is really happening out here? If you look at the position of the Americans, where they were in the game to win every battle. That was their finite goal. Whereas the North Vietnamese, they were in the game to keep playing the game. They put their lives on it. They wanted to make sure that they don't have a specific agenda or a goal that they have to win this battle. They are just going to be at it. For example, if you play a game to win the game, that's a transaction. If you play a game just to keep playing, that's an infinite mindset without a boundary or a border, much in the same way that you want to be healthy. And that is something, an infinite mindset. And he goes on to argue, therefore, in business, if we operate with an infinite mindset and we are purpose driven, then the game changes completely and you will eventually turn out as winners. Now, in the context of today, if we have a mindset of an infinite mindset, what has happened to us today is that, yes, we might be losing a battle, or we might have already lost a battle. We have lost our shirt, we have lost everything, we have lost money, we have lost customers and everything else. But if we keep an infinite mindset and in pursuit of a purpose, then the whole game changes, right? So that's one of the stories I thought would be relevant. This is something many of you who would have attended my sessions would have known this, so I will not spend much more time on this. Typically, when I ask this question, which team do you associate yourself with? The fact that you're running your own venture, on the left-hand side, as you can see, is the 2016 Olympics men's final run-up. And on the right is the marathon team run-up 2016 Olympics. Who do you associate with? Now, typically, I get anywhere between 60 to 70% with the marathoners and about anywhere between 20 to 30% or 30 to 40% on the sprinters. Now, again, there is no right or wrong answer, but my perspective is this. Why do most people choose to be associating themselves with the marathoners? Simply because if you look at our conventions, conventionally, we have all taken pride that this company is going strong since 1837, since 1928, since 1971, and so on and so forth. And which is good and great, of course. If the company has survived through recessions, industrial revolutions, world wars, and so on and so forth, certainly the company has done something very good. And so therefore, it is good to be a marathoner so that we are in here to be in the race. We are not gone here, be here, gone tomorrow. Whereas if you look at the sprinter, we all know who a sprinter is. Now, if you look at these two categories of people, they're completely different. They're differently trained. One goes through what is called an aerobic training, which is the marathoners, where they are able to store their energy in the muscles for a long time so that they can sustain a long journey. Whereas these folks, the sprinters, they go through something called an anaerobic training, where the energy can be released in a flash so that they get the maximum power out of their body and they can outbeat anyone else. Typically, they are found in totally two different corners of the world. One is in Africa, 4 countries typically, and these folks are in North America and Caribbeans and so on and so forth. So the point is, you won't see a sprinter who is running a marathon and vice versa because of that differences. Now here, what happens is when you are a startup, the difference between you and an enterprise is that your ability to run with an idea and be in the market in a time lesser than a guy in the corporate to take even to get their business idea approved, right? So therefore, the advantage that you have of a sprinter, the mindset that you have is something that is definitely that is by your side. Now, what I say out here is you are running multiple sprints over the distance of a marathon. And that's the mindset. It's a duality. It's neither a sprint nor a marathon, but you are having to run multiple sprints over the distance of a marathon. And so far, you might have had a few sprints already, given that you're already running your ventures. Some sprints would have succeeded, some sprints may not have succeeded, and you are stuck out here. But if you consider yourself that you're already run the business of a marathon, then you are not giving up, right? Let me introduce the third mindset that I consider at times. 10x, I say, is easier than 10%. If you look at it, it is 100 times more worth it for sure, 10 times and 10%. 10% is 0.1, but it is not 100 times harder, right? So what I mean by that, let me take an example. So 10x thinking to a problem. So this is a very common scenario in Africa. In fact, last year I traveled across three countries in Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Africa. And I have personally traveled through this kind of roads. Man, it's just scary. Even a four-wheel drive can't navigate this kind of roads. Now, someone who is trying to solve this problem, what would be the immediate thinking, thought process? Get some money from United Nations, get some money from rich countries, let's build a road, right? And that's the normal thinking. We need to build a road because we need to connect economies, we need to connect remote villages, and so on and so forth. Now, when you ask a question, why do we need to build a road? Maybe because we need to provide them access to market, access to medicines, access to healthcare, access to education, and so on and so forth. And when you ask those questions, maybe you can solve the problem very differently. Why do you need to build roads when you can do and provide all kinds of access by technologies which is already available today and which is exponentially growing in any case? Even if drones are limited by their carrying capacity of 100 kgs today, it is not too far when it would be 500 kgs going forward, right? So therefore, this is what I call the 10x thinking to a problem. You just shift your perspectives. In fact, just yesterday, I was talking to an engineering classmate of mine who is one of the scientists with the DRDO, Defense Establishments, and he is the design in charge of the gas turbine engine for our fighter aircrafts. And we were discussing, and we all converged on an idea that, look, I mean, all these warfares are going to be irrelevant 5 years from now. Who would think of, attacking some nation through naval warfare or even air force, right? I mean, we all know what I'm not saying. So the point is, we have to think, is this still very relevant? Why should a road be relevant anymore when you are talking of such problems? You can leapfrog, right? As an example. So, so I'm going to leave you with this thought process. More often than not, what we do is we try to change the answer. Meaning, how is this done today? This is done today by doing this. I have a better process. I have a better product. So you try and change the answer, which is evolutionary. It's an improvement, but it's a 10% improvement. When you change the question, as I changed the question, why do you need a road? I didn't say we can have a better solution to those muddy roads or no roads. When I change the question, then the answer that you might have is revolutionary. And when you change the assumption, again, I mean, it's very hypothetically, the assumption is that they all are looking for medication. Maybe not. In the deep villages of Africa, they don't care about modern medicine because they have access to their old ways of medicine. Anyway, this is just hypothetical. But suffice to prove the point that if you question the assumption, your thought process could result in a very disruptive solution. So basically, I've talked about 3 mindsets. There can be many more. I just wanted to challenge you on some of these thought processes as we are kind of, faced with a situation where everything is seemingly a challenging thing, and how do we navigate around that? And there can be many more. So last but not the least is about, this is also the time to learn. When I say learn, I didn't mean that attend just a session by someone like me or anyone else, or read a book and so on. Of course, those could be a potential sources of learning. To me, the sources of learning is about just look at the world, look at what's happening. Look at the first order, second order impacts. For example, today, we don't have, because the whole world has come to a stop, today we don't have a storage to store fuel, fossil fuel, right? Can we solve that problem? Today, or at least the next 12 months, who is going to harvest the crops in the US and Europe? As you know, in the US, to harvest the crops, I'm not talking of the grains, I'm talking of vegetables and fruits. It's the labor who goes from Mexico to the US to pluck the fruits and vegetables. Now, in the next 12 months, I don't foresee that is happening. So who does that, right? These are second order impacts. So therefore, what happens? If you look at Europe, typically labor force from North Africa, Morocco, Madagascar, and East Europe, they go and pluck the fruits and vegetables. That's not going to happen. What happens to that? So explore the world, think and connect different dots. So when I say that this is time to learn, what I want to actually leave you with is, how do we learn? So we learn things in two different ways. One is focused and the other is diffused. Not that one is superior to the other. Both are needed to have a comprehensive learning. Now, what is focused learning? If you look at the left-hand side diagram, it kind of mimics a brain. It's the structure of a brain. And I have drawn some neural pathways. There are some neural structures. Let's say we all know how to multiply things. We all know how to do 5 by 4. So therefore, the moment I give you the problem 5 by 4, your brain automatically triggers and navigates the brain structure and looks for the established neural pathways. And these are already established because you know already how to multiply 5 by 4. And so therefore, it does that very quickly and gives you that result. It's 20. If you look at the right-hand side, which is diffused, meaning something that you have not explored before. For example, division. Hypothetically, you don't know how to divide and you are in the learning process. When you are learning, it is new, your neural pathways are not established, you are kind of going absolutely randomly here and there till the point of time, or at some point of time, actually it will be forming some neural connections or patterns like on the left hand side, and even division will become, like the pattern on the left hand side. Now, what happens is research is showing that in order to maximize a new learning, you have to toggle between a diffuse and a focused mode of learning. Meaning, if you just stay focused, okay, I don't know division, I will just look at division, division, division. And so therefore, I focus on it for 4 hours and I will get cracking. This is the very conventional thinking. We all reward focus. We all reward, someone who is at his or her desk and puts the undivided attention on something. Research is showing, when I say diffused is about, for example, when you take a break, when you have coffee, when you are taking a stroll, when you are in the middle of a shower, when you are singing, when you are playing some music, that's your diffusion. What happens at that point of time, a lot of dots which are unconnected, you are able to draw those unconnected dots. So therefore, the most ideal scenario as per researchers today is that every 25 minutes of focus, a good 5 to 7 minutes of diffusion, whatever be your chosen method of diffusion, that gives you the best possible learning. The reason why I'm telling you this is that when you have to uncover the mysteries of the changing world today, especially in the context of your purpose, your mission, your business, your venture, something that is obvious will be covered on the left-hand side, something that you will read in the newspapers, something that you have to really extract out of your own understanding, that will only come through the diffusion process. The continuous toggle between diffusion and focused. So I just want to let you know there's a very good work done by Professor Barbara Oakley, in fact, who was in IIM Bangalore about 2 months back, and I had the opportunity to hear her. And she has got fantastic videos. You can refer to her, and I will give you those names at the end. Professor Barbara Oakley, it's a very nice this thing. So, any quick question at this point of time? And let me check if there is anything that is already up there on the chat, or you can talk about it, unmute yourself, whichever way you want, before I get into the tool sets. And at the end, we will have good amount of time in any case. So, doesn't matter, but I will take a quick pause at this stage. All right, I'll move on then. Not saying anything. So again, as I said, caveat, this is not like a tool set like you put an A plus B, C comes out. No, again, certain things that will help you think, that will help you challenge, that will help you discover, that will help you explore the complexity that we are headed in. And later on, if there is anything more that you want to share, or you want to ask, or you want to challenge, you're more than happy to look at that. So today there is a founder's quandary that goes without saying. What do we do? So the fundamental thing is that I wanted to put it across two metrics. Do you have the resilience? And I'll explain what I mean by that. And are you still relevant? By resilience, I mean, do you have the sustenance power? Do you have, what's your burn rate? What's your available cash in the bank? What's the morale of your team? How much of energy is left in the this thing yet? Hey, it could be great. I'm not saying necessarily that you're already out and dry, you don't have money, you don't have resilience, but there is a good chance. And one of the reasons why we are here today is that yes, people are running out of cash, they don't have the runway anymore, people are getting tired, the morale is down, and all of that. So that collectively means resilience. So the x-axis is about resilience, low to high. Y-axis is about relevance. The problem that you are solving, is it still very relevant to the world? It is still very relevant to your set of clients, or is it shifting to a new client, new set of clients, or new market? But still it could be relevant. So you can see it from both perspectives. Now, when you map X and Y, relevance to resilience, there is no prize for guessing that the right-hand quadrant is the best, right? That's the future, so you are kind of all set. For example, if you have been in the business of telemedicine, I think telemedicine as a discipline has made 10 years of progress in less than 1 week. Or if you are in the business of anything delivery, which is, let's say, which is cloud driven, as an example, cloud is a technology, that's a kind of future. Or if you're in something which is a zero touch kind of a delivery, for example, out in the West, as you know, there are robots which is delivering pizzas and so on and so forth. And there can be many more. I'm just giving you some offhand examples. So that's the future. So definitely you have the resilience, you have the relevance, and so the future is all set for you. Let's look at the second chance. What I mean by second chance is that, let's say resilience. You have resilience, you have the cash, you have the runway, you have your burn is under kind of control, but your relevance has gone down big time. A good example for that is Airbnb. Airbnb, first of all, the entire business model, which is, of course, social distancing will take its toll, but more than that, international travel is unlikely to happen in the next 12 to 18 months, let's say. And shared economy will have its own impact in the short run. But Airbnb has got a huge runway. In fact, just 2 weeks back, they raised another $1 billion from one of their, VC funds. So therefore, they have the resilience and they are reworking and reconfiguring, therefore, to stay relevant. Maybe they will come out with something new that beats the problem. So therefore, they're injecting $1 billion into the whole thing. So that's your second chance if you can afford it, right? Your resilience and your relevance has gone down. You are low on relevance, low on resilience. Of course, you will exit and pivot and do something else, right? And the last one is you are high on relevance, which is good, but low on resilience. So which means your fight for survival, right? And so this is a very simple way to assess your impact. Where are you today? And so therefore take your call. And many of these things will not have a straight off answer. But as I said, therefore, the future can be on some big part of the left-hand quadrant also, and so on and so forth. So just you can use this particular tool set to understand where you are. So when you have the problem still very relevant, your problem you're solving is still very relevant, I would like to ask this question, which is good news, but you might have to reconfigure it, because when you ask this question, I would like you to ask this question. Assuming you are starting the same venture today, post-COVID, you are starting in the month of, let's say, June 2020, how would you design it? The problem statement is still relevant, which is great, but you are starting the venture now. Would you design anything different? If the answer is yes, which most likely it will be, please do it. Problem is losing relevance. We have talked about that. We have showed you multiple quadrants. Pivot is one of them. The other, I would say, is examine your value chain, the complete value chain where all you are adding values. maybe you will see it now makes more sense to add value in the lower end of the chain, or maybe the higher end of the chain, or the middle of the chain, which you are not considering before. It's the same problem, but you're attacking a different segment of the value chain. And most importantly, examine your cognitive biases, because when you have to do the second chance and all that, you are likely to hit with those cognitive biases. You know what those biases are, right? You would have gone through in several sessions. The confirmation bias, the sunk cost fallacy. If you don't understand some of these, you can ask me as a question, I can explain later. But for sake of time, I'm just saying, examine your cognitive biases, your anchoring bias, your bandwagon bias, your confirmation bias, and most importantly, your sunk cost fallacy. Because you would not like to give up simply because you have invested so much. And I take this example. Let's say I have gone to a movie with my wife, and midway through the movie, she says that, the movie is lousy, let's walk out. And a guy like me, who is always conscious about value for money, I would say, hey, we have paid, it's a sunk cost in any case, let's stay through, sit in the theater, and so on, right? And we stay through. But that's actually stupid, because the money is gone in any case. By my staying for another 1.5 hours, we will go through the torture for additional 1.5 hours. What the hell? Why should we stay behind? We should rather go out. So that's your typical example of a sunk cost fallacy. In any case, it's not going to go anywhere. Why do we spend more energy, more money on it? But we all think that no, we'll make something out of it. These are difficult choices, not that easy identification, but we typically get carried away with that. So avoid those biases. Yeah. Let me introduce certain tool called AD. I will explain what that means. Let me first explain what I mean by radical focus on the customer. Now, if you really look at it, which business, including yours, will not say or claim that we have focus on, we are customer centric, we have customer focused, and so on and so forth. But you will quickly realize most businesses are not radically focused. Focus on the word radical, and you will quickly see why they are not. Can it be this time for you to discover where all such radical focus is missing in different industries, including yours, and you can be radically focused? Let me take some examples. All of us are familiar with the story of Blockbuster versus Netflix. Why did Netflix start? Because multiple reasons. One of the reasons, as you know, is because of the late fees that Blockbuster was charging. And it amounted to 12% of Blockbuster revenue, right? So therefore, if you really look at it, if Blockbuster was so customer focused, radically customer focused, would it have penalized their clientele by sucking up 12% of their revenue from late fees alone, which Netflix came and disrupted the whole thing by DVD in the mail, no late fees, right? So therefore, if you look at most of the legacy companies, even startups, they largely benefit from established asymmetries that represent a major disadvantage for the customer. Just read the top statement. There are major asymmetries in every industry, in most businesses, which is a source of major disadvantage for the customer. And this is putting a radical customer focus in mind, not otherwise. And we will examine more. Let's look at this bank. This is a European bank called Santander. If you have visited abroad, you would know that how much money we spend on foreign exchange conversions. We lose to an extent of 10-15%. Huge. I mean, this is absolutely rip-off. So therefore, when this news was, kind of flashed, so basically, what did TransferWise do? If you're not familiar with TransferWise, in fact, most of my consulting that I do outside of India, I get my money through TransferWise. There is hardly any deduction, and I can choose when I want it in my account. Let's say today, I think that today the US to Indian rupee rate is low. I wait for a higher rate. Maybe 2 days after it picks up. I decide. Whereas if you're doing through a bank, you don't have any such choices. So basically, by staying completely focused on a radical customer issue, and which has been going on for centuries and decades, and no one has even cared about it. Everyone thinks this is the norm. So if I am getting into the business of money transfer, foreign exchange, it is okay to charge 10% premium. No, it is not okay. That's exactly what TransferWise is doing. And once TransferWise has been successful, of course, there are several Me Too players now, and this is completely disrupted. This is just a template that helps, how to do this. Don't worry about this much. Let's look at in the oil industry. Let me take right now the example. If you look at, this is an economic term in the oil industry, there is a feather rocket effect, meaning when the global oil prices shoot up, your retail oil prices shoot up like a rocket, meaning very fast. When the prices fall, the global oil market, a feather falls at a very low kind of a space and speed, right? Rocket and feather, very low. So for example, today, if you look at the oil price is an all-time low today of $30 a barrel in the last 10 years. And look at what we did day before last week. We hiked up the price by 1 rupee 20 paise, right? So the point is, anywhere in the world, you will see that the fall in global oil prices is always disproportionately lower as compared to the hike. There is an immediate effect and the price hike is much more. When there is a fall, the effect happens much later and the quantum is also very low. Now, these are asymmetric disadvantages because people are not customer focused. So therefore, in our country, of course, it is controlled. I'm referring to countries where it is a free economy. So there are now gas stations who are actually reflecting their prices right on the day, on the same instant, and they're making money. But there was an assumption that this is how will this thing. Let's look at, so basically, if you look at, so many industries, look at the insurance industry. If you buy a health insurance, for the first 4 years, you cannot claim any money. They are sleeping on your money. They are not going to give any claim of yours for the first 4 years, in case you didn't know. That's how it works. Who says it has to work that way? Why can't you change those assumptions? As I said, if you change assumptions, then you might have a disruption. This is exactly what I mean by that. Every industry, look at airlines. You are canceling ticket. Pretty much these days, as you know, if you cancel a ticket, you don't get anything back. And when you are canceling pretty much 3 days before. And when you cancel 3 days before, that empty seat of yours is being sold by the airline at least 2x or 3x the money that you have bought it for. So therefore, look at some of these examples of asymmetric disadvantage that you have across the spectrum, across all industries, across all business, because we are not radically focused on customer. We are focused on customer, which is a lip service. Whenever there's an opportunity, we try and make money and don't really care for them. Can you identify some of these things and use them as a tool today to disrupt and question those assumptions, as an example, right? Next tool, re-examine your value chain, which I said. Now, everyone is talking about flattening the curve, so everyone knows what it means from a Corona perspective. Every industry will be looking for solutions. Every business will be looking for solutions that how does it contribute to flattening the curve on the Earth's capacity. Whatever business you are in, of course, may not be all, but most of the business that you might be in, when you examine your value chain, can you do something and add a source of value that you offer to the clients, because the client gets a feel, now is my turn with this venture X to contribute to the world by making, flattening the curve on the Earth's capacity, because they do things in a particular way, right? As an example. So these are again some easy picks that I can offer you. It may or may not be relevant. It may not work, but the point is I just thought of giving you certain tool sets. This is the last one. This is a bit complex. Don't worry about it. Not that you have to necessarily apply it. This is spelled as Cynefin framework. It's not Cynefin. This is a Welsh word from the UK. It's called Cynefin framework. Cynefin framework is actually a framework which is based on complexity science. Now, today we are in a world which is hugely complex. So therefore, complexity science is gaining momentum. Cynefin framework is used by DARPA. If you know what DARPA is, the Department of Advanced Research, the Defense, US Department of Defense, their Advanced Research Project, which is the famous from where all inventions, many inventions have come through. It is also used by and they use this framework for countering terrorism. Uh, Singapore as a nation uses this framework for risk management. Canada uses this. Many nations use it. You don't have to necessarily use it, but some of its aspect may come of use. The fundamental concept is any situation, if you look at, so let's say, let's look at the current situation, Corona. So there is a cause, then there is an effect. Now, when you have a situation which is very simple, right? Let's say when you know everything about everything, for example, let's take a business context. Let's say a loan payment processing. Let's say loan payment processing for a bank. So I am supposed to repay the loan. I have not paid the full loan this month. I have paid only 50% of it. Now the bank's officer exactly knows how to deal with that situation. There is a process, there is a guideline, it is documented, and there is no rocket science in it. So therefore, it is simple because it is a known problem. This is a known. So therefore, you sense what the problem is. You categorize where it falls. Does it fall under, let's say, loan default or loan delayed or whatever? And then you respond. You respond to the guy saying that, hey man, you have to pay a penalty, right? So this is simple. Let's say complicated. Complicated means that there could be multiple answers, but it's a known unknown, meaning there are a lot of things that are known. I'll give an example to prove it, to explain it. And it needs an expertise or an expert to solve the problem. So let's say your car has broken down. Now, when a car breaks down, we call in an expert because a car can break down for a number of reasons. For example, the battery might have failed. Any number of stuff within the car might have failed, and so on and so forth. So therefore, what do we do in that case? We get the help of an expert. What does the expert do? The expert senses the problem. It analyzes the problem. Okay, maybe there is a cut in the fan belt, and he responds to the problem by fixing the fan belt. So instead of sense, categorize, and respond, which was simple, where there was a guideline, so therefore there was no need for an expertise. This is a process-driven situation like a BPO officer. In the complicated situation, you need expertise. That's a complex. What's a complex situation? A complex situation is when it is not anything to be fixed. It's kind of a flux. There are no boundaries to the whole thing. For example, a Ferrari engine is complicated, right? But if you break down all the parts of Ferrari, an expert can put it all back. So because the sum is equal to the sum of all the parts, as opposed to a complex system would be, let's say, an Amazon forest. In an Amazon rainforest, you have always something or the other of a big nature happening and which you don't even know. For example, a particular species of insect on a given day is getting extinct. For example, there is something major weather change that is happening in some part of the rainforest, as an example. So it's in a continuous flux on which you don't have much of a thinking going on. It's not possible because it's in a complete state of flux all the time. In fact, many of our businesses today actually are getting into these complex zones because as we fail in business, as we do things, very often we don't know why things have happened. It's an unknown, right? So therefore, we have to probe first to understand why it has happened, and then you sense the situation, and then you respond to it. So you need to probe first in a detailed manner to do it. And chaotic is about, of course, Corona is a great example, but let me not use Corona. We are overusing it. Let's say 9/11. It's absolutely chaotic because you can't even know. It's unknowable. It's unknowable what happened. Just imagine the first half an hour of 9/11. No one would know what had happened. But people in power, in authorities, they have to act. They have to act. For example, without even knowing what has happened, there will be fire engines who would come, who would just spray water or whatever fire extinguisher on the Twin Tower, right? They will act fast to minimize and contain the damage. Then they will figure out slowly the sense and then respond and so on and so forth. Now, why I'm explaining all this? Because some of your business situations, you may have to first figure out what is happening. First of all, you have to make an assessment of, is it a simple response? Is it a simple situation? The cause and effect that is happening in your situation? Is it complicated? Is it complex? Is it chaotic? Or is it a mix of many? Actually, in many situations, it's a mix of many. It is not just one. And the way we deal with that can give an answer to a number of questions. Again, for detailed explanation, you can go through Cynefin framework. It's a bit complex, not that you have to use it, but all these tools help demystify complexity. And all that I was trying to do is to give you some flavor of making things simple, like the resilience relevance framework, the kind of Cynefin framework, and the AD framework is spotting opportunities and disruptive thinking and questioning different assumptions, right? So pretty much that was all that I had to say. And again, I always love to think this way, that there are times, typically the times like today, when we have to take a pause, which we are. I know many of you are extremely busy in serving your clients, or you are, plucking your hair to make the next move, which is all great, which you have to do. That's your transactions. But beyond the transactions, this is high time that you take a pause so that you can restart, rethink, reconfigure based on some of the things that I have said, I have shared, or you are hearing and learning from some other sources, from some other mentors. And with all of that, I'm sure you should be able to take this, I won't say opportunity, but rather an obligation that you can pretty much win in these turns. So this is not dystopian as much as it is globally. So I wish you all very safe health for each one of you, your families, your friends, your neighbors. I hope as a nation and as a world, we overcome this crisis. The sooner the better. And we come out as always as humanity as the champion. So go change the world. So all for you. I will stop sharing. Let me now see, and I can take any questions.
Yeah, Suman, there are some Q&As, if you can view them.
I will take a look.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Okay. So feel free. Any question, any comments, any observations, anything that you don't agree with, or it's a good conversation that we can always have.
Suman, some have posted Q&A in the Q&A post, if you can see.
Oh, yeah, but where is the question? I can see only one.
No, there are lots.
I can, where?
Okay, can I read it out? Lalita
But
Kulavarthi.
in the chat, is it in the chat
It's
window?
not in the chat.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go through.
Yeah.
Lalita. 3H catalyst. My thought, I like the sprintathon idea, but we want to sprint thoughtfully. Otherwise, I'm worried that in our hurry to sprint, move forward, sprinting in the wrong direction. But yeah, of course. I mean, the whole idea is, and that's why you are absolutely right. In fact, that's the reason why I ended the whole thing by saying that you have to take pauses. You can't just mindlessly run a sprint. No way. After every sprint or in the middle of a sprint, I'm not going by the bookish definition of the sprint. I'm staying at a philosophical, at a metaphorical level. Imagine that you have pressed the pause button on yourself and what it does to you. You have to reflect, you have to rethink, you have to reconfigure, you have to ask the question again. If you were starting the business today, how would that be designed? Would there be any change? In what way your customers have changed? In what way the requirements have changed? In what way the problem has shifted? Plus the different tools that I've exposed you to, the different kind of mindset that I've exposed you to. And then certainly you can run your sprint. And the sprint is nothing but an experimentation. Experimentation, some will fail, some will succeed. That's the nature of it. If all startups were to succeed, then it won't be a startup, right? I'm wishing you all success, but at the end of it, our sprint can fail. If it does not fail, then we are doing something wrong actually. Some part of the sprint will fail, and that's why it's a quick experimentation. That's why you should adopt the lean startup methodology. That's why you should adopt a build, measure, learn approach. If you are imbibing the lean startup methodology, then any failure will not cost you dearly because you're quickly iterating and quickly checking your position and your situation all the time. So therefore, yes, no mindless running. It's a mindful running. And at the same time, rapid experimentation, rapid prototyping, rapid everything, check it out, backed up by solid thinking, which you should do right now by taking some pauses. Yeah.
Suman will have to read out the question, so I can. Shall I read out the question so that others can also listen? What
Oh,
question?
this is not visible to others, is it? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Satish Kumar says he studied the logistics market for last 1 year and decided to launch a new startup as a pilot one in single city during May 2020. But for now, after the crisis, what will be the good time to study the market again and schedule the previous launching plan?
I mean, the time is, as I said, the time is right now. You have to continue to explore with your understanding of the first order, second order, third order impact, because how the entire supply chain will be reconfigured in whatever you are trying to do. And so, therefore, there is nothing that you wait for some day and then you study and explore. This is your time since you have not launched yet. And don't worry about because you had a date of May 2020, you have to launch it that time. Yes, you can do a soft launch with a reconfigured design and again go through that series of experimentation, which I said, given the way the whole, the whole landscape will change. Actually, it will go through a series of changes. It will go through multiple waves of changes. Uh, it is not that one change uh, will kind of freeze at the end of May or at the end of June or the end of July, and that will stay forever. A lot of behavioral changes will happen, and that will take its own time. So it is not just economic change, and that's why I have been trying to debate and argue with most of the people who try and compare it with, oh, we had a 2008 downturn, but it took us 12 months, we came out of it, and this and that. I'm not saying that we will not come out of it. There is a third dimension to the whole thinking. See, typically an economic recovery, there is always an X and Y axis, the economic momentum and the time, right? Today you have a third axis because a lot of restructuring will happen on the social front, on the economic front, and even on the political front. There'll be new power axes that will emerge and so on and so forth. Now, all these things are going to emerge. A whole lot of stuff. Again, I'm not saying like this will happen with certainty or authority, but the point is this is what my thinking is, because today I don't think any expert can for sure claim that recovery will happen in X months or problem will be sorted out in 12 months, like the whole corona crisis will get over in this time. No one is able to say that. So given whatever you are able to read and visualize, I'm also doing that, but I'm hopefully trying to give some sense to the whole thing by saying that uh, these waves of thinking, what you see in wave one, if you take that as given, you might be mistaken, because wave two, which will come after 3 months after, could be completely different. So at this stage, I would say that you're learning from the ground, your soft launches, you're making sure your problem statement is still very relevant. Check it out. I think that's the way to only do it and go for it, is what my thinking. Yep.
Next question is from Shubhra Banerjee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your thought on advice for thought or advice for scaling startup in hospitality domain with low resilience and perhaps still holding relevance in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yes, the hospitality space, of course, how it will emerge, it's anybody's guess. So therefore, there's a whole lot of assumption needs to be questioned. Questions need to be questioned. Why do people eat out? And you start from there. I mean, hospitality is at the end of the day. Why do we go for leisure? Why do we eat out? And start from those fundamental questions. Is that something that can be met in a way which is a little different from today, as an example? And therefore you will get those answers. So therefore, today's skills is about how well I can serve, let's say, food or something, some services to an individual. Now tomorrow, that particular chain is getting broken. Let me step back. Let me give a little macro level sense to the whole thing. If you look at global GDP, the global GDP about $85 trillion for the OECD countries, which is the advanced economies, the G7, G20s, and so on. In those economies, 70% of the GDP and near about 70% of the employment is in services. So therefore, this is one of the largest and the most influencing sectors across economies, across geographies, across everywhere. Now today, if you look at the service economy, what is happening is, at the end of the day, the basic infrastructure on which the service economy rests is about the economic infrastructure where there is a velocity with which money flows and money exchange hands and so on. Now that particular thing is broken because of social distancing. So the last mile is not going to be, let's say, met for some time to come. Now, whether it is 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, honestly, I don't know. By that time, maybe there'll be some behavioral changes. There'll be some social changes. There'll be something which will go through a change, some of which could be social, some of which would be social, which is maybe driven by technology. For example, going forward, again, it's a very guess. Don't get by what I'm saying. This is just to explain the thing. Now, last year, Domino's had already been piloting their delivery of the pizzas, as you know, by drones and by robocarts. Now, today, I am sure in the next 6 months that is going to be the norm, as an example, because some of the things are accelerating. 10 years of acceleration is happening in 1 week. Telemedicine. Telemedicine would have taken another 10 years to become mainstream. Today, telemedicine is becoming mainstream, right? That kind of acceleration is happening. So you have to figure out and question, if you want to be a pioneer, that what really is going to happen in the hospitality space. Based on that change, there'll be certainly rejigging of the skills that is needed. Now, what is that? Of course, at least I don't know. So the question is that of relevance, which is a very right thing that you have said. Yes, today's skill may fall irrelevant. Maybe some will be relevant, not all, but you might have to reinvent the whole thing. Yeah, next. And we can go through the question answer again if this is not clear enough or you're not convinced or something else. We can try and converse at the end of the series. First, let me go through all the questions. Here are the next.
Yeah, is it wise to go back to the drawing board to rework on the business model, to make an online presence, to make use of the opportunity, or should we stick to the current model?
Depends on what you are doing. First of all, rechecking, rechecking first, I would say, reassessing your business model is absolutely the smartest thing to do, and deep questioning, not just at a surface level, macro level, at a deep level. How are the customers changing? How are the partners changing? How is the revenue? Will clients look for? See, business model is all about what you deliver, how you monetize. These three fundamental questions. How are they going to change given the current situation? Deep enough, right? And deep enough, not only just on paper, which is validated through I mean, basically, your deep enough conversations with potential users and clients. So having said that, just an online presence, I mean, to me, that's just an access to the channel. At times, it may solve the problem. But as I said, I think likely if you go a little more deeper than that, for example, as I said, examine your value chain. Examine what it means to be a radical customer focus in your space. Online is about just adding an additional channel. I mean, fair enough. Like today, our immediate thought process is that, let's say in my neighborhood, I'm talking of the mom and pop stores, the grocery stores, whosoever could give us home delivery, they're making a roaring business, right? And some of them have online or pseudo online presence, like they're taking orders on WhatsApps and whatever. So that's good. But again, those kind of, that I would say as a very low order thinking, because going forward, everyone will have an online presence. Online presence is given. I think you have to think much beyond that. And that thinking should really hold the key to your success. Online presence will be a given for everything tomorrow. Yeah. Radha, go ahead.
Yeah. Falguni says, would you consider recruitment service losing relevance?
So depends what you mean by recruitment services. I know conventionally recruitment is about recruiting employees for the corporates, but corporate would still need people. Call them employees, don't call them employees, that doesn't matter. There is always a mix and match of talent versus, the requirement. Now, tomorrow, this could all be belonging to sources like a LinkedIn or whosoever, who knows. But at the end of the day, doesn't matter whether you have a smart engine or manual or whatever. Basically, if you have to stay relevant, the only mantra is ask these questions. Would a corporate still need talents? The answer is yes. Will they need it for lifetime? The answer may not be. Would they need very special kind of talents? Yes. Where do I get them from? Can I source? So when you ask these fundamental questions, you will get the answers. So you might have to redefine what you mean by recruitment services. Recruitment of a talent will be relevant for times to come. It may not be for employment, but trying to find the best resource. Let me give an example. Let's say your client is looking for an AI engineer, right? Now, in the Bangalore market, assuming you are in Bangalore, in the Bangalore market, getting an AI engineer is very difficult. And you will get, people who are looking for jobs, typically. Getting a good guy sitting in Google, sitting in Amazon, sitting in Oracle, and so on, and getting him to join another company is a very difficult one. It's not easy. But if you have a reach to the entire globe, and if you have a mechanism to figure out, there could be a bright engineer sitting in Ghana who does not speak the right language, who does not have the right body color, and so on and so forth. You know what I'm saying? And so therefore, they do not have an access to the world, but you have an access to the real talent, and you give it to a company, they would actually love you. The company would love you. And so therefore, you have to redefine that you are going to get a best talent from whichever corner of the world, and which you can do today. It is possible to do today. Can you redefine your problem? Again, these are hypothetical thoughts as an example. Temporarily, certainly you will have a slowdown, simply because who would recruit in today's times? Unless very specific small recruitments that would happen. But the point is the bulk of recruitment, because first of all, everyone would wait and watch how it is going to pan out, right? No expenses would be tolerated. Maybe they might have to backfill some critical positions, which they might. That also they will try to juggle and shuffle and try to contain any kind of cash spend. So while all of that will be there, you will have to figure out why would it be now that still they might need people. Actually, they will need people for a very specific skill that is needed for them to overcome the crisis, right? So think about in those lines. Yep.
The next one is Rumit. Which specific framework could be used to study disruptive implementation in the context of an existing startup? He joined late, so he might have missed it. That's what he says.
I don't know from where you joined, but first I talked about the mindset. I would say all the items that I've explained in mindset, what you can do is Radha will make the recording available to you. Go through the recording. Mindset, all of it is applicable. On the tool set, of course, anyone can be applicable. None of them could be applicable, but I would say examining your value chain is certainly going to be relevant, and certainly your radical focus on the customer, that is going to be relevant for sure. So AD framework and this thing. And since Rumit, I know your business, what you are trying to do, I think it might have a better relevance going forward because of the isolation. So you have to think a little more about it, but you know what I'm saying. I think the isolation and the space and all those things are going to be very important. So think about it, but certainly I would encourage you to look at the recording, and you might take one or two stuff out of it. Certainly use it. Yep.
Yeah, the next one is, what should we focus on the next 3 months or till the COVID situation subsides? I'm an early startup venture.
So if you're an early startup, if you are not yet on your revenue curve, I'm assuming by early you're meaning that, or very negligible revenue, and you're still finding your product market fit, then you are in a much more comfortable spot in from that sense. So therefore, I think the slide that I shared on that, basically asked that question. If you were, of course, you are starting today, I don't know when you started, but post-COVID, you are starting, what part of the value chain would you reconfigure, right? As an example. So I would say, definitely this is a great time. You don't sit tight, rather continue to explore, evolve, use some of the tools that I have given you, and do your experimentation. This is the best time to experiment. People have the time. If you can reach out digitally to people, you will get best possible responses, and you should be able to engage in deep conversations, which for many of you, I guess, is a problem, and which I always keep telling you that, look, I really don't appreciate all these surveys and all, because surveys are basically people, they give just random yes or no answers. It's about deep conversations through which you really understand the nuanced meaning of what one says and what one means. And this is the time for the next at least couple of months. Most of us are going to be saving on our commute time. So time is in abundance today. At least people in Bangalore and elsewhere in any urban areas of the world, people are saving 2 hours on an average. Assuming just 250 million people in the country commute to work, there's a 500 million hours, is coming to your advantage. Just try and think those ways. What is in abundance? How can you leverage? Can you leverage by having a conversation with them, by running some experiments with them and those kind of stuff? So yeah, I mean, I can go on and on. All that I'm saying is, no, it is not a good idea to stay quiet. These are all very active ideas for you to really, without, of course, burning cash and money. Because if you had spent 10 rupees 1 month back without much thinking, today please think twice before you spend 10 rupees also. Preserve cash. Cash is king. Yep. Yeah.
Is Akshay Mane. What are cognitive biases?
Yeah. Cognitive biases are biases that unknowingly we do things. For example, let me explain two of them. Confirmation bias. If you are doing a survey or an interview, let's say you are in the business of, organic grocery vegetable delivery. The way you will ask the questions, the tone of your questions, and the nature of your questions, you are actually seeking a yes to what you want to hear. You want to hear that people love organic stuff. You want to hear people would love to have it delivered at home. You would love to hear all this kind of stuff, right? So your questions should be necessarily biased towards that. So that is called a confirmation bias. You're seeking confirmation, and you have to consciously stay away. And so therefore, how do you design those questions? The other bias which I talked about is a sunk cost fallacy, meaning I gave that example, like you and your friend who have gone for a movie, and your friend says, hey, the movie is so boring midway that why don't we step out? And you say, hey, I mean, we have spent all the money. let's just stay through. In any case, you spend the money. But that's not what desirable, because you have spent the money, it is gone in any case, and you are going to have that torture for the next 1.5 hours. Why do you do that? So it is exactly what sunk cost fallacy is all about. You're not going anywhere, but you want to stay invested simply because you have invested in it and you don't want to sentimentally get away from it. And so therefore, those are multiple fallacies. Please do a Google search on cognitive biases. There are at least several of them, but there are some 5, 6 key, like bandwagon bias, anchoring bias, so on and so forth. So look at those things, and I think it will do a lot of good for you. Yeah.
From Jammu Kashmir Startup Association. So, what impact do you see on agri-tech startups in near future?
Agri-tech is, of course, a broad term. Agri-tech, for example, I believe is going to, assuming agri-tech is a broad term, but as I said, I don't know if you are through the presentation, the entire presentation. In my view, agri-tech will be a potentially big sector. For example, a lot of people who in cities, in urban areas will go for example, vertical farming. Because today we are scrambling for getting our daily supplies, right? Tomorrow, if I have a little bit of space in my balcony, better if I'm on my terrace, I would like to be self-sufficient, number one, plus safety. And agri-tech, assuming that you are doing things which is avoiding chemicals, because there is a big component of saving the planet will come into being. I told you that flattening the curve on Earth's capacity and Earth's consumption. So definitely, if by doing agri-tech, you are kind of taking care of some of them, I think agri-tech as a sector can do a huge impact. Of course, we need to do a lot of smart things. I'm not, okay, we cannot get into a details on the call right now, but overall as a sector will have a lot of promise. Yep.
Uh, we have one more question from them. So they found relevance resilience framework is amazing, and where can startups read more about it?
What's the framework?
Relevance and resilience framework is amazing. Where can startups read more about it?
I Of all the frameworks, I think that's not the one that you might. Let me figure out, because hmm, that is long time back. I might have read not exactly the same version, but a little kind of this thing, and I kind of made it myself to some extent. I think the rest of the other, most of the stuff are available. You can read a whole lot of stuff. This one, let me figure out. If I can get, I will share with you, Radha, and you can share with them. But I may or may not have this one in particular.
Sure. Kashish Bhatia Garg, can you please guide or refer anything from fashion industry changes?
Hmm. Uh, no, I can't give you any thing. First, I'm not an expert. Second, I haven't studied that industry quite well. But suffice to say, uh, again, look at it this way: fashion in the very near future. Uh, so, fashion is based on discretionary expenses, right? So, goes without saying, in the near future, that is kind of gone. Uh, Fashion may reinvent itself in a variety of different ways, depend on what part of the fashion you are in. For example, assuming for the next 12 to 18 months, a whole lot of folks are going to spend time at home. So maybe, who knows, maybe home fashion will go through some change. Today, somehow we just put on some shorts or something and we're just so casual, but maybe, some home fashion may emerge, number one. Number two, I was suggesting to some folks who are in the business of manufacturing masks and all, I said that, look, mask is going to be the next fashion accessories. I'm not going to be satisfied with this stupid mask, this is blue and all that. As a fashion, see, masks are going to stay for more, reasonably long time, or maybe forever, who knows, as an accessories. So invest into fashion accessories for masks. Who knows, right? It's already there. Louis Vuitton, was it Louis Vuitton? I think Louis Vuitton. Yeah, Louis Vuitton has already got a mask. Yeah, I saw a mask with a Louis Vuitton stamp. Maybe it's fake, maybe it's original. I don't know, but Louis Vuitton masks is already there. Yep. Okay.
Next question is RTI Wala team. He says, Suman sir, thanks for giving such an insightful session. I'm Sumit Mahendra, founder of RTI Wala Services, a legal tech startup. I humbly wish to know your opinion on impact of this pandemic on online on-demand legal services. What three most important things they should do to minimize the impact?
Okay, great. So first of all, I think that's one thing I just wanted to let everybody know, that please examine your contracts, potential, anything that is up for a potential dispute. And in fact, I wrote a blog which was posted last week. One of the first things I said is avoid disputes, preempt your potential disputes, and try to address them, because you might have an unserviced contract, you might have not been able to fulfill. Now, normally, most people may or may not be going after you or running after you, but who knows? So, therefore, proactively to do it. Now, switching on to RTI Wala, now I'm not sure whether you're just into RTI or other things as well. My point is, since your question is about legal services, I think legal services certainly will get a spark, my belief, because of what I said just now. There would be issues because there would be exposures of every business, and there would be people, they might take a lenient view and not resort to legalities, but there would be people who would resort to legalities, because it would kind of be fueled by, because someone else has sued me, so I am suing you. So, that there's a whole ripple down effect of this whole thing may happen. So therefore, I would kind of tend to think that it might have a good this thing traction.
Okay, so
No, I can't summarize. You have to go through the video for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Good.
So Deepak Muniraju, sectors focusing on essential services will probably do better under these circumstances. What would sectors which are non-essential service, hobby-based like photography sector, do you think people will be willing to invest on these sectors when personal finances are short? How should these sectors face the current crisis? Would we have to restructure our model on providing only core essentials that people may need? Do you think hobby sector could do well?
So I have given you. That's why the relevance versus resilience is the key thing. So if you yourself, I'm not saying, but yes, it is an easy guess that this may not be on the top priority from a relevance perspective. And even if you have resilience, meaning money, would you like to burn that way, or would you pivot and do something else, depending on what your purpose is, what big problem in the world that you want to solve? So if your purpose is that, see, doing this photography thing, it's a part of a larger purpose. Photography is just an instrument. So if your purpose was to do something bigger, solve a bigger problem, and in alignment with that, if you think something else you can do, so think of that. So think of other avenues. Uh, think of the value chain of photography. Photography is not just the photography itself, but so many other things. And I'm afraid it's about memories that you want to preserve. So is that fundamentally going to change? So what behavioral changes are you expecting in people? Uh, so those questions, I'm not an expert, neither I can advise you specifically, but certainly it is after your deeper conversations with your existing folks, existing users, some of the potential future folks, figure that out, put it on relevance and resilience, and then if it doesn't work, just go for a pivot.
Yeah, the next would be Smita A. Comments on food and edtech industry in current situation and future prospects, please.
EdTech is all about EdTech. I mean, the whole world has gone EdTech, so therefore depends on what you specifically you're doing in EdTech. I can't comment specifics, but EdTech in general, is just doing great. So you should be all right. Now, food is, of course, no way connected with EdTech. I guess you have two different ventures. So food, again, food means food is very broad. Is it raw vegetables, raw materials, or is it cloud kitchen, or is it food delivery? Depends on what you are doing. So food is something that would go through a massive behavioral change, the access that people have, the way people have access, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the way things will work out. Now, honestly, I'm not sure if I could answer your question, but I guess that's how you have to stay put.
Yeah, and we have one more question: is any specific inputs for training, behavioral training, how to handle the current dip? Kavita from Score Training.
Any specific? Well, there could be plenty. I think one of the things certainly is about mindfulness. I think mindfulness is very important. Now, we all think that mindfulness is for people who are going through, anxiety or mental crisis, and so therefore meditation, mindfulness is for them. No, actually, mindfulness is for anyone who wants to be productive at work, because we want to channelize our mind in a very productive way. So, what does mindfulness do? Mindfulness is all about this. Just I'm giving an example. So, there could be many, but since you've asked for specific behavioral training, I think mindfulness would be a great one. So, mindfulness is basically helping you channel, helping you basically less of a distraction, right? And so therefore you can be a lot more productive and in what you are doing. At the same time, of course, I'm not contradicting myself. There is an importance of diffusion, and the diffusion is all about connecting the unconnected dots. And when you mix both of them in a conscious manner, you can have a great results out of what you are trying to do. It is all about the consciousness of your mind in doing something in a manner that gives you the best results. So mindfulness could be a great behavioral training at this stage.
Okay, I think that's it. Uh,
Okay.
we are done with Q&A. Thank you, Mr. Suman.